Hi, welcome to Think Tank Television. I'm Erin Johnson, and today we have as our guest our Selectman Justin Evans. Welcome, Justin.
Thanks, Erin. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's always great to see you. So you're running for re-election now, right?
I am, yeah.
Okay. Well, I just to clarify, is your term 2 or 3, 3 or 4 years?
They're 3-year terms. I was elected in 2019.
Okay. All right. I can remember that. Okay. So what was last year like? Well, I mean, the whole term. What was the whole term like?
It was
the highlights.
it was a lot really fast. So, I got elected hoping to accomplish a couple of things, and we got a good start on some, long-term planning, some, sort of smaller goals that I'd set for myself, become a municipal vulnerability preparedness community.
Mm-hmm.
Adopting the CPA, but then COVID hit and the whole term changed. And I spent just about as much time in Zoom meetings for Board of Selectmen meetings as I did in person. So it changed the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to bring this up right away, but you mentioned the Zoom meetings and the committee meetings. And I just had a question about, if you don't mind, the public meeting rule. Now, I know you've had several executive sessions, and I know, well, what exactly is the public meeting rule?
So the Commonwealth has I don't know if it's a law or a regulation that all meetings, municipal meetings have to be held in public. And so, or during the pandemic, some of those were suspended, so there was public access. Things would have to be either aired live or recorded and shown shortly thereafter live, or minutes available almost immediately, taken for the whole meeting. So that's the in a nutshell, the open meeting rule is that when we have sort of discussions, whether it's school committee, Board of Selectmen, library trustees, the historical commission, they have to have those meetings open or available to the public. Okay,
now there's another question. What is an executive session?
So an executive session is an exemption to the open meeting rule. It's usually applied for things like contract negotiations. So you don't want to undermine your own bargaining position by having that discussion in an open meeting. We also usually will hold them for discussions about personnel, whether it's disciplinary or otherwise, extensions of sick time, that kind of thing. Things that you want a level of privacy for the sake of the employee.
And is there a limit to how many of those you can have a year?
That's a good question. Not to my knowledge, as long as you meet the legal required exemptions. Minutes for executive sessions are still recorded, can be released with redactions if requested by members of the public.
Okay. All right, that's interesting. And so, okay, I think I want to tell you, I know you wanted to talk about the regional school assessment. Is that what it is?
Yeah, so that was something that early in the first term. So we, as you know, Whitman-Hanson's a regional school district. First adopted that in the early 90s, became a regional school, well, a full regional school. There were a regional high school and separate town school committees and school breakdowns below that before. But for the first time since Ed Reform in '93, we actually amended the regional school district agreement in 2020 at an outdoor pandemic distanced summer town meeting, where both towns overwhelmingly voted to adopt changes to the regional school agreement that brought the agreement more in line with state education financing law.
Okay. I'm sorry. Is there anything else you wanted to tell us about your first term before I get into the other questions?
Sure. I mean, we can go through some of the other stuff that we should probably touch on the pandemic. It was a pretty big part of the term. Yeah. Early March 2020, we all got thrown into a crazy new world that we're still living in, and I know the board, myself included, tried our hardest to keep the public informed, keep everything going forward. WHCA helped out to keep our meetings televised and live. I was managing the Zoom meetings behind the scenes in some of the Board of Selectmen meetings. We had a lot of help recently getting more checks from Plymouth County for CARES expenses. Plymouth County administered the CARES Act program and are going to continue administering the American Rescue Plan Act funds. So it's been very fast. It's a lot to learn. And I think the town of Whitman and most Plymouth County communities came through very strong, as best we can.
Despite the COVID, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think you mentioned the CARES. Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, it was I don't remember. It's an acronym, but it's coronavirus aid that was passed in 2020, signed into law, I think in the middle of 2020, to get aid out to the community. So it was financial. It included stimulus checks out to just about every American if you met the income guidelines. For municipalities, CARES meant a large amount of funds to help, buy tests, to retrofit schools for better ventilation. The town of Whitman purchased a COVID-specific ambulance with CARES money so that we didn't have to decontaminate an ambulance, not knowing who was going on COVID-related runs. It was a lot of, it helped fund our vaccine clinics. It's been, it's been kind of incredible. It came at the right time.
Yeah, it really is amazing considering the scope of this pandemic. I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, there was a lot. It had to come together very quickly, and it's surprisingly worked pretty well. Oh, here we go. Our producer is sending the cheat sheet: Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act.
Okay, so oops, that was me. I forgot. Okay, and what about, is it ARPA, the other one?
ARPA is the other one. So that was passed in 2021. It's the American Rescue Plan Act. Came with another stimulus check, more relief for cities and towns, for states. The money's going to function relatively the same. The town did get direct aid that way with ARPA. So we've got a little more flexibility in how we use some of the ARPA funds. However, it is a couple of tactical differences. With CARES, there was a pot of money that Plymouth County was administering, and we were told, spend it all by the end of 2021, or it's going to be redistributed to other communities that have spent more.
Yeah.
So Whitman tried to spend more and see if we could get a little bit more money back. We don't know that yet, but we may. With ARPA, we know exactly the amount of money we're going to get, what we're going to be able to spend, and we know that we have 3 years to spend it. So it's a little bit more of a how long can we make this one-time pot of money last, as we're buying up test kits and running vaccine clinics, and looking at some economic recovery things we're allowed to do with it.
Okay, and speaking of emergencies, it seems, have we had a high turnover in the police and fire departments recently?
We've had, well, at the top level of all levels of government, we've really had a lot of turnover. I wouldn't say police and fire specifically, but the chiefs of, in the 3 years that I've been on the Board of Selectmen, we've replaced a police chief, a deputy police chief, a fire chief, a deputy fire chief, a town administrator. We're looking to hire a new assistant town administrator, council on aging director, retired. We are trying to think through the rest of the departments really quickly. It's been a lot. People are talking about a gray wave in municipal government as the previous generation starts hitting retirement age and deciding it's time to move on.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Now, what about hiring? Are we going to replace everybody that left, or is there a need to?
We have been so far. With the assistant town administrator, we're currently discussing what we want that role to be, because we just hired a new town administrator. Mm-hmm. Previously, our assistant town administrator had kind of been, I don't know if you want to say specifically a training position, but it was our town administrator was a little older and thought, maybe someday this assistant town administrator could take over and move across the office to the bigger office. Mm-hmm. But now we've got Lincoln Heineman's our new town administrator, and hopefully he's not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's kind of looking at what are the needs, what do we want to do to balance that office? Are we looking for someone with more human resources experience, grant writing, or do we want an assistant town administrator and continue what we've been doing in the past, which has worked pretty well for the town.
Okay. I know I wanted to ask you a question, and it's kind of more of a think tank question, but I'm gonna say an official, an elected official, okay? When you talk about, in general, how money should be spent, when you're talking about really solving big problems in communities, where would you start? What department would you start with if you said, whatever, there aren't enough, there's too much, I don't know, too much traffic or too many, I don't know, or not enough, call it high school graduates. I mean, where would you start with, in general, what's the answer to many questions?
Yeah, so a focus of the last couple of years, and I'm proud to have been a part of it, has been long-term planning for the town. So if you remember 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, we brought in a consultant, John Madden, to do a sort of financial analysis of the town, see what we were doing right, what we were doing wrong, what departments are growing quicker than the budget can support, what departments are held back by resource constraints already. We took that, developed a new capital plan. This is when I was on the finance committee a couple of years before, but a 5-year capital plan for how we're going to spend one-time money and update that kind of stuff. And we just recently completed a strategic plan for the town that combines, those documents with a town survey that we did and another financial policies that we've been adopting over the last couple of years. And that strategic plan kind of drafts what we want the next 5 years to look like. So it went not just department by department, but it went sort of areas of citizen involvement. So we looked at, to pull one example, in the next 5 years, the Board of Selectmen agree with the school committee, we would like to adopt full-day kindergarten.
That's wonderful. I'm glad.
Top of the education part of the strategic plan list.
About that, really, yeah.
And the school committee, the superintendent included it in his budget this year, which for the first time since I think the override failed in 2016. So I'm optimistic that this is the year that we get full-day kindergarten.
Yep, I love it. So okay. What would you like to tell us about your future plans for the next, well, it will be 3 years, right? Oh, I'm sorry. When is the election? It's in May, right?
Yeah, that's it's May 21st. It's always the third Saturday in May.
Okay.
That's right.
All right. And then why don't you tell us what you plan for the next 3 years?
So some of the next 3 years, initially we've spent a lot of time building out programs like MVP, Community Preservation Act, things that, put in a lot of work in the last 3 years. I'd like to see these programs take the first steps toward grants or projects that can be funded with them now that everything's in place, all the building blocks have aligned. So short term, I'd like to see the first Community Preservation Act projects funded by town meeting probably in 2023. I think we've starting to receive money now, but we probably won't fund a project for another year. I'd like to see us fund our first climate resilience projects with MVP grants. Now that we're in this MVP planning community, we can start applying to action grants. So things like stormwater management with increased rainstorms.
Oh, good. No,
sort of energy resilience. Yeah.
Does that mean collecting rain? That's what it sounds good.
Not necessarily collecting rain, but just redirecting it so that that part of South Ave where 27 turns on Franklin Street doesn't flood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Looking at things like that. Sort of longer term, bigger picture, I'd like to see full day K funded. That's a big one. Like everything's in place. We can do it this year. I'd like to see us get together. And then something that's been bothering me recently has been housing affordability. So I'd like to see us take a look at what we can do at a local level to stop. Home prices have been going crazy the last couple of years. And that's great if you're a homeowner, and it's not so great if you're trying to buy your first house. And for people who've been in the town for a long period of time, just last year was a tax reassessment year. And it just happened to coincide with a once in a generation pandemic where commercial real estate prices all fell and residential real estate prices all climbed. So the 2.5% average assessment that we're allowed to increase on properties within town shifted the balance toward the residents. Because if commercial property values decline, their taxes are less. And if residential properties values increase proportionately, their taxes are going up. So if we don't start getting some things under control, even if it's just making it easier to build in-law apartments so that people have places to live, I'd like to see us take a hard look at some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something people need. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, there's always a demand for housing. And you want it to be reasonable, you know, want people to feel like, you know, they can't buy a home if they want to.
Yeah.
Okay. What other sorts of things do you have planned?
Very breaking news, it'll be in the Whitman Express tomorrow, but the bylaw study committee for the last, I would say 3 or 4 months has been looking at repealing the prohibition on recreational and medical marijuana establishments and setting some regulations for how the town of Whitman could license those facilities.
Mhm.
So that proposal came to the Board of Selectmen recently and was referred to the planning board. They'll hold a public hearing. But the basic outline of the plan is that the town could license up to 5 medical or recreational marijuana facilities for either growing or sale. And it'd be, host community agreements. We would adopt, likelihood adopt the 3% local tax that you're allowed on there. And it would be an interesting revenue opportunity that we've seen, Rockland, Abington, Brockton, Hanson has authorized some marijuana establishments. It just feels like we're behind the game there.
Yeah, and I can see where there are benefits in terms of tax revenue, but have there been any problems in other places with increased, say, driving under the influence? I mean, I don't even know that they can test for that, right? They have an alcohol test, but I don't know if they can actually test for marijuana, right? If they're supposed to
It's a good question. I think the standard now is field sobriety tests, the way they would not necessarily have a breathalyzer, but get out and walk a line, touch your nose. But the towns that have adopted it have largely benefited from it. I don't know that there's been any widespread things. I think the biggest thing right now is that there's a sort of a community impact fee that you're allowed to charge, which we could redirect to, other drug enforcement programs or things that could help mitigate some of the potential pitfalls of something like this. But right now, just over the line in Brockton, there's a retail marijuana establishment that Whitman is not collecting that post impact community fee from. So it's the reasoning in 2017 and 2018, when the town voted to prohibit these establishments was, we don't necessarily want to invite this into our town, and now it's here anyway. So.
Yeah. All right. So that's an interesting point.
Yes, that's an interesting development that's gonna.
Yeah.
It's coming out very soon. I think the proposed bylaw just went up on the town website.
Okay. All right. And okay. So no, I was going to ask about that town meeting. That's in May too, isn't it?
Yeah, that'll be the beginning of May.
Okay. All right. So that's nice. Anything else you want to talk about coming up?
I mean, those are the big goals. There's some larger projects the town of Whitman is still considering. So going back to the capital component of it, as you may know, I've been on the capital committee the whole time I've been on the Board of Selectmen. So we authorized the replacement of the sewer force main all the way to Brockton so that we can continue to send our sewage to the sewage treatment plant, something that really want to keep doing. That project is ongoing. I think it's likely ARPA funds will be involved there to help reduce the impact on ratepayers. I do think ratepayers are seeing the increase that the Board of Public Works commissioners voted last year. That's going to be coming out in the next water sewer bill. So I'm sure I'll be hearing about it. Some other major projects we have going on in town. There's been a lot of grants used for street, sidewalk, and intersection repair. So you've probably noticed the corner between the park, the police station, and the Colebrook Cemetery. That turn has been completely reconfigured to slow cars down. So you're not taking that quick right as people are going from the park over to the cemetery. I think that it was a safety grant, and I think it was well deserved, and hats off to our Department of Public Works for seeking that grant out. They applied for and received a similar grant in the center of town that will include pedestrian bump outs to slow cars down going through the intersection in the center, and kind of standardize the street width there. I don't know how often you cross right at that center of town, but each intersection, each crosswalk is a different length.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of irregular. And last, the two big projects that there are building committees for that we're looking at the next couple of years are a new DPW building. It's been a long time goal of the town. It's been voted down a couple of times, but maybe this time it'll work. And the middle school, there's a middle school building committee looking to replace the Whitman Middle School building that's 50 or 60 years old.
Yeah, well, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
All right, that's nice. I think that's about all I wanted to talk about. And
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you, Justin, for being our guest again.
No, thanks. Anytime, Erin.
We'll see you again soon. And thank you, everybody in Whitman and Hanson, for watching tonight. Thank you. Have a good night.